Welcome to the channel. Tonight, we dive into 3 chilling true tales of terror tied to the 4th of July. From haunted lanterns to phantom carnivals. Get ready for spine-tingling horror you won't forget. Stay close, and don't look away when the fireworks fade. The 4th of July was always a big deal in Marlow County. Townsfolk decorated their homes with faded American flags, kids ran wild with sparklers, and the older folks sat in lawn chairs sipping spiked lemonade, reminiscing about past parades and fireworks. But Hollow Ridge had always been different. It was a place that people didn't talk about much anymore. Not because they forgot, but because remembering made them uncomfortable. Hidden deep in the forest, a 2-hour drive from the main road, Hollow Ridge had been the site of a now-defunct campground. Abandoned after a fire in 1997, had claimed the lives of 3 teenagers. Unsolved and unspoken. Their names were burned into a wooden plaque that still hung at the ranger station, though vines had since swallowed most of it. The last time anyone had tried to celebrate the 4th there was that same year. But teenagers are stubborn, especially those who crave a thrill. Gavin was the kind of guy who knew how to push things just far enough. He wasn't reckless, he was deliberate. He liked planning parties that tiptoed on the line between exciting and dangerous. That's how the idea of spending Independence Day weekend at Hollow Ridge was born. "Dude," he'd said, his grin stretching ear to ear. Bonfire, beers, fireworks. The works. All in the most haunted place in the county. You in. There were 5 of them. Gavin, Tasha, his on-again off-again girlfriend. Rennie, quiet, observant, maybe too much for her own good. Dean, tall, loud, obnoxiously brave. And Micah, the one who always hesitated last but came anyway. Tasha rolled her eyes but smirked. "So you want to spend the most American holiday in the creepiest patch of woods in the state?" "Exactly," Gavin said. "Tradition." Dean laughed. "Tradition is fireworks and hot dogs. Not ghost camp. That's what makes it fun," Gavin said, his voice dropping. "They say if you light a fire on the ridge and stay till midnight, you'll see them. The 3 teens who died. Some say you'll smell smoke before you see them." "I heard the fire didn't even kill them," Rennie said quietly. Everyone turned. She looked almost embarrassed. "I mean, that's what I heard, that they weren't burned." "Not really. Their bodies were found untouched. But their faces—" "Okay," Micah interrupted. "We get it. Creepy. Sure. But why now?" "Because," Gavin said, "no one's done it since. It's like the woods are begging for company." That Friday, they packed up 2 tents, coolers full of drinks, fireworks they'd picked up in Tennessee, and headed for Hollow Ridge. The road to Hollow Ridge wasn't much of a road anymore. Gravel quickly turned to mud, and even in early July, the trees hung heavy with fog that didn't seem quite right. As they passed the old ranger station, a collapsed building overrun with weeds, Tasha muttered, "We're going to die." Dean slapped her knee. "If we do, I hope it's on camera. I want my ghost to go viral." "Shut up," Micah whispered. Rennie stared out the window, her fingers twitching nervously. "Do you hear that?" They went silent. It was more like what they didn't hear. No birds, no bugs. Just the crunch of tires and the wind like a distant whisper. They reached the clearing at sunset. A large, circular patch of land ringed with dead trees. There was a fire pit in the middle, too perfect to be natural and far too clean. "Someone's been here," Rennie said. "Not recently," Gavin replied, kicking at the pit. The wood was old. Besides, that's the original campfire. Same one the 3 teens used. Micah looked around. "So, where are the cabins?" "Burned down," Gavin said. "Well, except for one. There was a dilapidated wooden structure deeper in the woods, barely visible from the clearing." Rennie noticed it first and walked toward it, her eyes fixed. "Let's set up here first," Gavin called after her. "Then we can go exploring." Reluctantly, she returned. They pitched the tents, started a small fire, and as darkness draped itself over the ridge, the fireworks began. The first firework cracked through the night sky with a loud boom, scattering white light in all directions. They cheered and laughed, passing drinks around the circle. The fire grew warmer, brighter, and for a while, it felt like any other 4th of July. Except it wasn't. Rennie kept looking behind her, as if expecting someone to emerge from the woods. "Do you see something?" Micah asked, following her gaze. "I don't know," she replied. "It's like something's moving just at the edge." Dean stood and waved his flashlight around the tree line. "Nothing. Relax, rain. It's just your brain playing tricks. Fog, shadows. It's the perfect setup for ghost stories." "Exactly," she whispered. "But what if the story's real?" Another firework screamed into the air and exploded in green. That's when they heard it. A crackling noise, faint but deliberate. Micah turned to Gavin. "Did you bring extra firewood?" "No," Gavin said, standing. "Why?" "Because someone just threw a log into the fire." The crackling wasn't coming from their fire. It was coming from the woods. A thin veil of smoke drifted from the direction of the cabin. At first, it seemed like it might be nothing, just fog mingling with heat. But the smell wasn't fog. It was ash, burnt hair, charred flesh. Tasha gagged. "Ugh, what is that?" Rennie stood. "We need to go." "Now?" Gavin asked. "We just got started." "I'm serious. Something's wrong." The smoke thickened. The light from the fire flickered strangely, almost as if it were being pushed back. Dean stood beside Gavin. "Let's just check the cabin. Make sure no one else is here." "No," Rennie said sharply. "Don't go there." They ignored her. Flashlights cutting through the dense smoke, Gavin and Dean trudged toward the dark outline of the old cabin. Each step felt heavier. The sounds of the forest remained eerily absent. Tasha, Micah, and Rennie sat at the fire, staring into it as if it might protect them. "You should have listened to me," Rennie whispered. "They always show up when someone disrespects the fire." "What are you talking about?" Micah asked. "They weren't random kids. They were part of something. Something old. The fire wasn't an accident. It was payment." The door to the cabin creaked open with little resistance. Inside, it was nearly pitch black, save for the beam of Dean's flashlight sweeping across the room. "Jesus," he muttered. There were drawings on the walls, crude stick figures, always 3. One with an X over the face. One missing a hand. One whose mouth was drawn open, like it was screaming. A moldy sleeping bag lay in the corner. A pile of burnt wood in the center. "Who the hell would stay here?" Gavin whispered. Then they heard a voice behind them. A whisper, soft but unmistakable. "Get out." They turned, but no one was there. Dean swallowed. "You heard that, right?" Gavin nodded slowly. "Let's go." As they turned back toward the door, they saw it had closed behind them. Dean rushed forward, yanked it open, and froze. Outside wasn't the same. The fire was gone. So were the tents. And the fog. No, the smoke was so thick he couldn't see past his own hand. "Gavin," he said, backing up. "Something's wrong." From deep in the fog, a figure began to form. No, 3 figures. Their faces were pale, eyes hollow. One had no hand. Another had a mouth hanging unnaturally wide. The last's face was scorched black, the features gone. They stepped forward slowly. Gavin reached for the door and slammed it shut. "We're not alone." Back at the fire, Rennie was crying. "They shouldn't have gone in there," she said. "It's almost midnight." Micah tried to comfort her, but Tasha stood, staring at the smoke. "I see them," she said, her voice dull. 3 people. Rennie shot up. "No. No, no, no. Don't look at them. Don't speak to them. That's how they get in." They're not speaking, Tasha said. Then her eyes rolled back. She collapsed. The fire roared to life, higher than before, white-hot and twisting. A scream echoed from the woods. Micah grabbed Rennie. What the hell is happening? They're claiming her, she whispered. We have to get the others. No time. At the stroke of midnight, the fire died, and the ridge fell silent. Micah dropped to his knees beside Tasha. Her body was stiff, cold already, like she'd been lying in the snow. Her lips were slightly parted, eyes half open. But what terrified him the most was her expression. Blank? Yes, but stretched thin with a subtle smile, like she'd just heard a joke only she understood. Tasha? He whispered, shaking her shoulder. Come on, this isn't funny. Rennie knelt beside him, not touching her. She's gone. What do you mean gone? He hissed. She's breathing. She's not. Not really. Look. Smoke curled from her mouth, thin and gray, rising like incense. Micah stumbled backward. Jesus Christ! The woods answered with the sound of movement. Wet, dragging steps just beyond sight. The fire pit, now just a ring of blackened ash, began to smoke again. Not from flame, from underneath. Rennie grabbed his arm. We need to leave. Now. What about Dean and Gavin? If we don't go now, we won't be able to. This place, it's waking up. She turned and sprinted toward the treeline, the only path not covered in fog. Micah hesitated a second longer before chasing after her. Behind them, something exhaled. In the cabin, Gavin and Dean still stared out the door, paralyzed. The figures hadn't moved, but the air was heavier now, like breathing through wet cloth. Gavin's hand trembled on the doorknob. We need to run, he whispered. Dean was already backing away, flashlight beam jittering. The figures didn't chase them. Not yet. But as they fled the cabin, something changed. The woods had rearranged. Where there had been trees, now there were fences, splintered and half buried in the ground. Dozens of charred poles jutted from the soil, each crowned with rusted metal hooks. Where the hell are we? Dean panted. I don't. Gavin paused. Do you hear that? A soft chant, garbled syllables looping again and again. They followed the only open trail, the air growing hotter with each step, until they stumbled onto a clearing that hadn't been there before. Rows of wooden crosses filled the space. Some were burned down to nubs. Others stood tall, but every single one bore a set of initials. Old, carved deep, almost ritualistically. At the center was a circular stone, about waist-high, covered in ash. A pair of handprints, small, childlike, pressed into its surface. Is this a graveyard? Dean asked. Gavin stepped forward.
No.
It's something else. He read one of the crosses aloud. EJ 1912. Another, SC 1954. Another, JT 1997. Dean froze. That's the year. The three who died. Their initials. JT. Dean nodded slowly. Jordan Trent. He was one of them. And this one, KL, that's Kara Lowell. The fog swirled, reacting. And behind them, a voice murmured, soft and mournful. She never left. They turned. Tasha stood at the edge of the clearing, but her eyes weren't hers. They were black, oily, and shining. Run! Gavin shouted. She smiled. Micah and Rennie ran until their lungs felt like glass. But the woods didn't end. The trail they'd followed looped back on itself 3 times. Every tree looked the same. Every sound came from the wrong direction. This isn't working, Micah gasped. Rennie stopped, doubled over. We're not supposed to leave. What? This place, it doesn't let you go. Not unless it wants to. Then what do? We find the fire. The real fire. Micah frowned. What does that mean? She looked up at him, and her eyes glistened with a kind of ancient fear. I read about it once, in a newspaper from the 70s. Before the teens died, other people vanished up here. Every 4th of July. It wasn't public, covered up. But there were survivors. One woman said the fire was a gate. You had to light it, feed it. Then you'd have a chance. A chance? To trade. Micah didn't like the sound of that. Trade what? Rennie didn't answer. She just started walking again. Back in the clearing of crosses, Gavin and Dean kept their eyes on Tasha as she stepped closer. She didn't blink. She didn't speak. Her movements were too smooth, like she was being moved, not moving on her own. Dean raised his flashlight, but it flickered and died. Behind Tasha, more figures appeared, half-formed, blurred at the edges like unfinished drawings. All of them watching, waiting. What do you want? Gavin asked, voice trembling. Tasha tilted her head. They want a replacement, she said, but her voice wasn't hers. It was layered, echoing with 3 different tones. Dean reached into his pocket and pulled out the lighter. Screw this. He flicked the flame and touched it to one of the crosses. It lit instantly, roaring with unnatural force. The figures hissed and backed away. The flame spread from cross to cross, and suddenly the whole field was on fire. Gavin grabbed Dean's arm. We need to go. Now. They ran through the smoke, blindly, until they crashed into a wall of cold air. Then open space, the original clearing, the fire pit, and Rennie standing there with Micah trying to strike a match. Gavin's heart nearly exploded with relief. You're alive. Rennie didn't look up. Help me. He knelt beside her. What are you doing? Trying to open the gate. Dean was pacing. What gate? What are you talking about? They're not ghosts, Rennie said. They're part of something older. Hollow Ridge wasn't always a campground. It was a burial site, but not for the dead, for the trapped. She finally got a match to light and tossed it into the pit. Nothing. Gavin leaned closer. It needs more than fire. Rennie nodded. Dean sighed, dug into the cooler, and pulled out a bottle of whiskey. This enough of an offering? He poured it into the pit. The flame sparked, then roared. The smoke that rose wasn't gray, it was red, like blood turned to steam. The ground trembled. A sound echoed, deep, throaty, not human. The air split, and from the trees, Tasha screamed. Not a human scream, an animal scream, raw and guttural. She emerged from the woods, stumbling now. Her arms flailed as if she were fighting something inside her own skin. Micah ran to her, but Rennie pulled him back. Don't. It's not her. Tasha fell to her knees beside the fire, retching smoke. Then, like something had been ripped loose, she collapsed. This time not stiff, not smiling, breathing. Micah caught her as she fell. She's back, he whispered. But the fire didn't go out. The pit cracked, glowed, and then the ground beneath it fell away. A stairwell descended into pitch blackness, made of old, moss-covered stone. They all stared. Dean was the first to speak. We're not going down there, right? Rennie looked at him, eyes hollow. If we don't, it comes up. From deep below, something began to climb. The air that bled from the stairwell didn't smell like rot or fire. It smelled like memory. Burnt books, melted crayons, rain on a chalkboard. It was wrong in a way that made your teeth ache. And from somewhere below, there came the sound of something dragging itself upward. Not hurried, but certain, like it knew no one could stop it. Dean backed away, shaking his head. Nope, not going. Not a chance. Micah was cradling Tasha, who had passed out again. Her breathing was shallow but real, her lips twitching with the echo of words she hadn't spoken. Gavin stared into the pit. How deep do you think it goes? Too deep, Rennie said. It's not a basement. It's not a bunker. It's something else. They all stood in silence as a low, slow groan echoed from the bottom of the stairs. It was wet, like lungs that had been underwater too long. Dean ran a hand through his hair. Look, whatever that thing is, we can't fight it. We can't even see it. So why aren't we running? Because it doesn't matter, Rennie said. The ridge bends to it. You run, it follows. You hide, it waits. But if we go down there, maybe we can end it. You said we could trade, Micah said. Who's the trade? Rennie didn't answer. Dean stepped forward, the flame in the pit flickering against his face. Wait, what if this is the trade? Going down. Maybe it just needs someone else. No, Rennie said firmly. It's never that simple. You don't give it a body. You give it a truth. A truth? She nodded. That's what the article said. The woman who survived said she confessed something. Something she never told anyone. Then the fire let her go. So this thing feeds on guilt? Gavin asked.
No.
It feeds on secrets. Real ones. Old ones. They fell quiet. Then, slowly, one by one, they descended the stairs. The stone steps were slick with condensation and soot. Each footfall echoed like it was being swallowed by the dark. The walls were carved, but not with words. With shapes. Twisted faces. Eyes stacked like totems. Symbols that seemed to crawl if you stared too long. After 20 steps, the light from above vanished completely. Micah flicked on his flashlight. It barely reached 5 feet ahead. The stairwell opened into a vast underground chamber, wide as a cathedral but too low for comfort. At the center was a pit. Not a fire pit, but a mouth, gaping and rimmed with black stone. Smoke slithered from it in slow pulses. Around it stood 3 burnt trees, still rooted in rock. At their base were 3 figures. The teenagers, Jordan Trent, Kara Lowell, and Milo Parks. Their bodies weren't ghostly. They were whole, dressed in scorched clothes, unmoving, as if frozen mid-thought. But their eyes were alive, darting, wet, and aware. Dean stumbled back. Are they alive? No, Rennie said softly. But they remember. The smoke coiled upward, drawn to the group. And then, from the mouth, something rose. Not a figure, but a presence. It had no body, no voice, but it was felt by each of them individually. Micah tasted copper. Gavin heard a scream in reverse. Dean saw a shape inside his own eyeballs, like a shadow etched behind his retina. Rennie dropped to her knees. It's waiting. For what? Gavin whispered. She didn't look at him. Us. They stood there, the heat rising, sweat soaking their clothes. Then the whisper came again. Not aloud, in their heads. Tell me. Rennie stood first. Her voice was soft, like she was afraid it would break if she spoke louder. When I was 12, I watched my brother drown. I was on the dock. I could have jumped in, but I didn't. I froze. And he went under. The smoke surged toward her, but instead of attacking, it pulled back, like a wave recoiling. The whisper again. More. Gavin stepped forward. I got into a fight with my dad. Pushed him. He fell, hit his head. I told everyone he was drunk. But it was me. Dean's lips parted, trembling. I told Kara to meet me here in 97, he said. It was supposed to be a prank. She never left. Micah stood with Tasha still unconscious in his arms. His voice was barely a whisper. I loved her, always, but I never told her. I let Gavin take her over and over. I just stood there, like I always do. The room fell still. The smoke calmed. Then silence. One by one, the trees ignited. Jordan, Kara, and Milo blinked. They opened their mouths. They breathed. Kara looked directly at Dean. You left me. I didn't know, he said, stepping back. I didn't mean to. You told them we were drinking, that I ran off into the woods. I panicked, he said. I didn't know what else to say. She stepped forward and smiled. Now you do. The smoke surged. Dean screamed, not because he was burning, but because he was being filled. His mouth opened wider than humanly possible, the skin at the corners tearing. Smoke poured into him like he was an empty bottle. Then silence. He stood up shakily. But it wasn't Dean anymore. His eyes were too black, his smile too calm. He walked to the mouth and stepped in. There was no scream, no fire, just acceptance. Then the chamber began to collapse. Gavin turned. We need to go. Now. They sprinted up the stairs, the whole ridge groaning with age and anger. The mouth was closing. The trees cracked. Smoke bled into the stairwell, but it didn't follow. They burst into the clearing just as the fire pit sealed behind them with a sound like a tomb locking shut. The smoke lifted. The fog dissolved. Birdsong returned. Rennie dropped to her knees. It worked. Micah looked down at Tasha. She blinked, whispered, "Is it gone?" He nodded. For now. Gavin looked toward the cabin. It was gone, as if it had never been there. What happens now? He asked. Rennie stood. We never speak of this. Not again. But what if someone else? They won't, she said. Not this year. Takes time. It sleeps between trades. Micah stared into the trees. Somewhere a branch cracked. He didn't believe it was over. But he nodded anyway. They packed their things in silence.
No fireworks. No celebration. No laughter.
Just the hum of summer and the long, quiet ride home. As they drove past the old ranger station, a breeze rolled through the trees. And from somewhere deep in Hollow Ridge, a whisper replied, "Tell me." Every 4th of July, the town of Millersfield lit the Lantern Festival, a centuries-old tradition where each family crafted a lantern to set afloat down the river at sunset. It was supposed to bring luck and honor the town's founders. But beneath the cheerful lantern light flickered a shadow that no one talked about, a curse as old as the river itself. No one remembered exactly when it began. Some said it was the price of a broken promise. Others whispered it was the anger of a spirit drowned in those waters long ago. But every year, just as the lanterns floated on the gentle current, something went wrong. They called it the Lantern's Curse. 18 years ago, on the night of the festival, Sarah Miller's younger brother vanished.
No trace. No screams.
Only one lantern floating away, untouched, and glowing brighter than the others. The town never spoke of it again, but the Miller family never recovered. Emma was Sarah's daughter, a woman with her mother's sharp eyes and stubborn heart. She returned to Millersfield this July determined to uncover the truth. It had been 18 years since that night, and every year since then, the same stories surfaced. Flickering lanterns in the fog, voices whispering from the water, shadows swimming beneath the surface. Emma didn't believe in ghosts or curses. But as the sun began to set and the river caught fire with the light of 1,000 paper lanterns, she felt the air shift, as if the river was breathing. The crowd gathered at the docks, children giggling and tossing pebbles into the water, families clutching glowing lanterns ready to send their wishes downstream. Emma clutched her own lantern, hand-wrought from twisted metal and painted glass, an heirloom passed down from her great-grandmother. The mayor began the countdown. 3, 2, 1, light. Lanterns flickered on one by one, and the crowd cheered as they released their hopes into the night. Emma's lantern caught the breeze and drifted out over the water. But as she watched it float away, she noticed something strange. One lantern, far upstream, pulsed with a cold blue flame, not yellow like the others. The river seemed to ripple, distorting the lantern's reflection like a warped mirror. A chill ran down Emma's spine. The crowd's cheers faded, swallowed by an unnatural silence. Suddenly, the water around the blue lantern bubbled, like something beneath was trying to break through. "Look!" a child cried. The blue flame flared, then exploded in a burst of cold light. sending a shockwave through the river. The crowd gasped as the lantern shattered, pieces sinking into the dark water. From the spot where the lantern had been, a hand broke the surface. Pale, thin, and dripping wet, the crowd froze. Emma's heart hammered. The hand was followed by an arm, then a face. It was a woman, but her eyes were empty pits, her skin translucent and dripping with riverweed. She reached out, mouth opening in a silent scream. "Get back!" Emma shouted, pushing people away. But the river was alive now, churning and swirling as more figures emerged. Ghostly shapes tangled in kelp and mud. A voice echoed, cold and hollow. "Release us!" Emma stumbled back, her lantern slipping from her grasp into the water. The river's surface rippled and roiled as the figures climbed ashore, their forms flickering like dying embers. She recognized one among them. A young girl, no older than 10, staring at Emma with eyes full of sorrow. "We were trapped," the girl whispered, "cursed to the river by the founder's greed." Emma's mind raced. The stories her grandmother told about the town's founding, about a pact made with the river spirit to prosper, now made sense. But breaking the curse would mean facing the darkness lurking beneath the festival's light. And tonight the river demanded its price. The crowd had scattered, but Emma stood frozen, eyes locked on the pale figures stepping out from the riverbank. The young girl with sorrowful eyes hovered closer, her voice like the whisper of rustling leaves. "They were greedy," the girl said. "Our families betrayed the river spirit, promises broken for wealth and power. So we were bound here, year after year, waiting." Emma's throat tightened. Waiting for what? To be freed. The water behind them churned, and more figures emerged. Men and women with sunken eyes and tangled hair, their forms flickering between the living and the drowned. Each one reached out, their hands trembling with longing and desperation. Emma wanted to run, to leave this nightmare behind. But something in her gripped tight, an obligation to these restless souls. She stepped forward, breath trembling. "How do I help you?" The girl's eyes glistened. "The founder's lantern must be returned. The one lost in the river 18 years ago. Only then can we be released." Emma shook her head. "No one's ever found it. We've searched. But the river holds many secrets," the girl whispered, stepping closer. "If you dare to dive beneath the water's surface, you might find what you seek." Emma's heart pounded. The river was cold and dark, a graveyard of forgotten things. Behind her, the lantern festival lights flickered nervously as the wind shifted, carrying a sharp, wet scent. The ghostly crowd moved in unison, their voices rising in a haunting chant that echoed off the water. "Return what was lost, restore the cost, or be forever bound to the river's frost." Emma's hands clenched into fists. Her family's history, the town's secrets, it all collided in that moment. The river was not just water. It was a prison, and she was the key. Emma took a deep breath and stepped toward the river's edge. The water lapped cold against her boots, sending a shiver up her spine. The ghostly figures gathered silently around her, their eyes pleading. The night air was thick, heavy with expectation. She waded in, the water rising quickly, swallowing her knees, then thighs. Her lantern, forgotten on the dock, flickered weakly behind her. The river's current tugged gently, coaxing her deeper. She closed her eyes and dove beneath the surface. The world flipped upside down, a cold, dark void that swallowed all sound. Her lungs burned as she kicked toward a faint glow deep below. There, tangled in a bed of moss and silt, she saw it. A lantern, its glass cracked but the blue flame inside still burning cold. Her fingers closed around the metal frame, and the moment she touched it, a jolt shot through her. Visions flooded her mind, faces distorted with fear, drowning hands clawing at the surface, a voice screaming promises broken. She struggled to the surface, gasping for air. Emma burst from the river, clutching the lantern. The ghostly figures circled, their faces softened by hope. She held the lantern high, its cold blue light cutting through the darkness. The chanting stopped. The river stilled. A soft voice whispered, "Thank you." One by one, the figures faded, melting back into the river, their faces peaceful for the first time in centuries. Emma stood alone on the dock, the lantern's cold flame pulsing gently in her hands. The curse had lifted, but as she turned to leave, the water behind her rippled once more, and a new lantern, glowing with an eerie green flame, floated silently toward the shore. Emma stared at the green flame flickering against the night. Unlike the cold blue of the Founder's lantern, this light burned warm but unnatural, like something alive, watching. Her hands trembled as she reached out and caught the lantern just as it brushed the shore. The air shifted again. The river whispered, weaving voices into the wind. "Not done," the voice said softly. Emma spun, heart pounding. The ghostly figures were gone, but the sense of something waiting lingered like a storm on the horizon. She took a step back, lantern held tight. "Who's there?" she called into the night. Only the rustling trees answered. Her phone vibrated sharply in her pocket. A message from an unknown number. "You freed them, but now you must pay. Find the second lantern before the fireworks' final spark, or all will be lost." Emma's breath hitched. She looked at the sky. The town's 4th of July fireworks had already started, lighting the horizon in bursts of red and gold. Time was running out. She turned toward the old mill, abandoned decades ago but rumored to hide secrets deeper than the river itself. With the eerie green lantern lighting her path, Emma set off. Behind her, the river rippled, sending tendrils of mist curling into the night. The curse had shifted, and the real nightmare was just beginning. Emma's footsteps echoed against the crumbling walls of the old mill. The green lantern's eerie glow cast twisted shadows that danced across broken beams and shattered windows. The air smelled of damp wood and forgotten memories. Inside, the silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant crackle of fireworks echoing from the town. She moved deeper into the mill's heart, her pulse quickening. The message on her phone repeated in her mind. Find the second lantern before the final spark, or lose everything. Suddenly, the lantern flickered violently, casting a swirling pattern of light against the stone floor. Emma stopped. Beneath her feet, a loose stone shifted. She knelt, pressing down until it gave way with a dull thud. A hidden compartment revealed itself. A rusted box coated with river moss and engraved with ancient symbols. Her fingers trembling, she lifted the lid. Inside lay a lantern, blackened and cracked, its glass tinted with a faint green glow that pulsed softly like a heartbeat. She grasped it, and instantly the air thickened. Whispered voices surrounded her, urgent and pleading. The green lantern was alive. The curse was not just a tale. It was a pact. Emma's mind flashed back to the stories her grandmother told, of deals struck to protect the town, but at a cost too great to bear. The Founder's greed had damned them all. She raised the green lantern beside the blue one from the river. Together, the flames merged, swirling into a bright, blinding light. A voice filled the room, clear, powerful, ancient. Balance restored. The whispers ceased. The air lightened. Emma felt the weight lift from her chest. Outside, the final firework exploded in a spectacular bloom of color. She stepped out into the night, the two lanterns safe in her hands. The river was calm, the curse broken. But as she looked back at the mill, a shadow flickered in the doorway, a reminder that some secrets never fully disappear. Emma tucked the lanterns close and walked toward the glowing town, knowing that while this night's terror was over, Millersfield would never forget the price paid in lantern light. The old carnival had been shut for decades, but every Independence Day, The town of Coldwater heard the distant echo of laughter and the creak of rusted rides. They called it the 4th of July Phantom Carnival, a ghostly replay of a tragedy no one wanted to remember. In 1953, a fire swept through Coldwater's summer carnival, trapping dozens in the funhouse. Some escaped, others vanished without a trace. Since then, locals say you can still hear screams beneath the fireworks. Alex had grown up on stories of the carnival fire, but never believed them. When his little sister disappeared on July 4th, he knew the stories were real. That night, the sky roared with explosions and the smell of gunpowder filled the air. But the silence from the old fairground was unsettling. Alex's flashlight cut through the thick summer fog as he stepped onto cracked pavement, past the rusted carousel and shattered booths. The carnival lights flickered faintly, though no power had flowed there for years. A carousel horse groaned on its rusted pole. From the shadows came a child's laugh, high and cold. Alex's breath caught. "Who's there?" he called, voice shaky. No answer, just the distant echo of carnival music, warped and slow. He moved toward the funhouse. The front door was ajar, swinging on creaking hinges. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and something else, an acrid sweetness like burnt sugar. The funhouse mirrors lined the walls, but reflections twisted, showing faces not his own. Smiling, crying, pleading. Alex's heart hammered. A voice whispered behind him, "Stay forever." He spun. A figure stood at the end of the hall, tall, blurred, wearing a carnival mask cracked in half. The fire had never left, and neither had its victims. Alex's flashlight flickered wildly as he took cautious steps deeper into the funhouse. The carnival music grew louder, distorted and uneven, like a broken record stuck on a loop. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and something fouler. Rotting cotton candy, stale popcorn, and something metallic beneath it all. The cracked mirrors lining the walls reflected not his own image but fleeting glimpses of past horrors. Faces contorted in terror, children reaching out, adults screaming, fragments of a nightmare trapped in glass. His skin prickled, every nerve screaming to flee, but he forced himself onward. Somewhere beyond these walls was his sister, and he couldn't leave without her. The hallway curved, and ahead, a faint light glowed from behind a torn curtain. As he parted the tattered fabric, the room beyond revealed itself. A warped carnival stage, lit by flickering bulbs that cast grotesque shadows. At center stage stood a carousel horse, but this one was different. Its paint peeled, eyes hollow, mouth twisted into a sinister grin. Suddenly, a child's giggle echoed from the shadows. Alex spun around, heart pounding, but no one was there. The floorboards creaked beneath his feet, footsteps, too many footsteps, circling him. He backed toward the stage where the carousel horse seemed to move, its head turning slowly to face him. "Help me?" A whisper echoed from the darkness. His breath caught. The voice was unmistakably his sister's. He called out, "Emily, where are you?" The response was a shuddering sob, coming from beneath the stage. Alex crouched and found a trapdoor, half hidden beneath debris. The wood was warped but gave way under his hands. He descended into the darkness below. The air grew colder, damp. Water dripped somewhere nearby, echoing in the confined space. The faint glow of his flashlight revealed chains hanging from the walls, rusted and old, and faded children's drawings smeared across the stone. A chilling realization hit him. This was where the victims had been held, trapped beneath the funhouse during the fire. Suddenly, icy fingers brushed his neck. He whipped around. Nothing but shadows. A voice hissed close to his ear, "Stay forever." Panic surged through him. He scrambled forward, desperate to find Emily. Then, out of the gloom, two glowing eyes appeared. A child's face, pale and gaunt, hovered just beyond reach. "Don't leave me," she whispered. Alex reached out. The figure dissolved into mist. Above, the carnival music began to slow, the fireworks in the distance fading. Time was running out. He had to find her before the night claimed them all. Alex's flashlight flickered as he pushed deeper into the subterranean tunnels beneath the funhouse. The air was thick with decay and despair, every breath tasting like ash and damp earth. His heart thundered in his chest, not just from fear, but from the raw urgency to find Emily before it was too late. The narrow passageways twisted like a labyrinth, walls slick with moisture and covered in faded murals depicting scenes of carnival joy twisted into grotesque nightmares. Smiling clowns with hollow eyes, children with faces stretched in silent screams, horses frozen mid-gallop with broken limbs. The farther he went, the heavier the silence became, until the distant sound of footsteps echoed, slow and deliberate, coming from just ahead. He froze. A shadow flickered against the tunnel wall, elongating into a figure dressed in a faded carnival uniform. Its face was obscured by a cracked mask, the eyes dark voids that seemed to swallow the light. "Leave this place," it whispered, voice like rusted metal scraping stone. "No," Alex replied, voice firm despite the trembling inside. "I'm finding my sister." The figure advanced, a cold presence pressing against him like a weight. "You will join us," it said, stretching out a pale hand. Alex backed away, heart hammering. He heard a faint cry, a voice he knew, and sprinted toward it. The tunnel opened into a cavernous chamber illuminated by eerie green light emanating from glowing fungus clinging to the walls. In the center lay Emily, pale and unconscious, bound in rusted chains. "Emily!" he shouted, rushing to her side. As he knelt to free her, the masked figure appeared behind him, voice low and threatening. "The fire's hunger must be fed." Alex's hands shook as he worked the chains loose. Emily's eyes fluttered open, wide with fear. "We have to go," he urged. The walls trembled, dust falling as the chamber shook. The fire was awakening. A deep rumble echoed as flames erupted in the tunnels behind them. Ghostly fire that burned cold, licking the walls with blue and green tongues. Alex grabbed Emily's hand, pulling her up. They ran, shadows chasing them, screams filling the air. The carnival's nightmare was alive, and only they could escape its burning grasp. Alex and Emily sprinted through the twisting tunnels, the cold fire's glow flickering behind them. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning wood. Yet the flames themselves felt unnatural, cold and spectral, casting an eerie light that made shadows dance in impossible ways. The walls groaned and cracked, dust raining down as the carnival's cursed past seemed to crumble around them. Alex's heart pounded as he pulled Emily along, the chains on her wrists clinking softly, a chilling reminder of the nightmarish captivity they had escaped. Ahead, a faint sliver of moonlight spilled through a crack in the tunnel ceiling. "Almost there?" Alex gasped, desperate to reach the surface. But the masked figure reappeared, blocking their path. This time it wasn't alone. Behind it, ghostly carnival performers materialized. Twisted forms of clowns, acrobats, and ringmasters, their faces frozen in expressions of sorrow and rage. "You can't leave," the ringmaster intoned, voice echoing like distant thunder. "The carnival never lets go." Emily whimpered, clutching Alex's arm. Alex squared his shoulders, gripping the green lantern he had found near the funhouse entrance, its eerie light cutting through the darkness like a blade. The ghosts recoiled from the lantern's glow, shrieking in agony. "Go!" Alex urged Emily, stepping forward to confront the phantoms. The ringmaster advanced, but as Alex raised the lantern, its light flared, burning away the shadows. One by one, the ghosts dissolved into sparks, their mournful cries fading with the wind. The masked figure screamed, a sound of pure despair, before vanishing into nothingness. The The tunnel walls stopped shaking. Silence fell. Alex and Emily stumbled into the moonlight, breathless and trembling but alive. Behind them, the fun house was nothing more than a crumbling ruin, its curse finally broken. The distant fireworks lit the sky, joyful and bright. Alex looked at Emily, tears mixing with soot on their faces. "We made it," he whispered. But somewhere deep in the ruins, the faintest echo of laughter lingered, a reminder that some horrors never fully disappear. Alex helped Emily to her feet, their hands trembling as the last remnants of the ghostly carnival faded into the cool night air. The ruins around them whispered with the weight of forgotten screams, but the oppressive heaviness that had clung to the air for decades seemed to lift, replaced by a fragile peace. The fireworks exploded overhead, showering the sky in bursts of red, white, and blue, their joyous noise a sharp contrast to the dark memories etched in the crumbling walls. Alex looked down at Emily, her eyes wide but shining with relief. "It's over," he said, voice rough, but even as he spoke, a shiver ran through his body. The carnival's curse might have been broken, but the town of Coldwater carried its scars deep beneath the surface. They made their way back through the empty streets, the scent of smoke still lingering faintly, a ghost of that terrible night. As they reached the edge of town, Alex glanced back once more. The silhouette of the funhouse stood faint against the sky, shadows shifting as if alive. A soft, distant melody began to drift on the wind, the haunting tune of a carousel calliope, slow and mournful. Alex's heart clenched. Somewhere, beneath the fireworks and laughter, the phantom carnival waited, always waiting. Thanks for joining these eerie journeys into 4th of July nightmares. If you crave more real horror stories and dark legends, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Until next time, keep your lights on and watch the skies, because some horrors never fade away.